You're listening to the Reinvest Podcast, where each Tuesday we show business owners and entrepreneurs how to diversify into real estate by equipping you with the tools and tactics to build generational wealth. Your hosts, Garrett Gatton and Seth Simonillo. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Reinvest Podcast, episode 114.
It's cold out.
It is. We're in Northwest Ohio, and we're rapidly in that changing season, which is why today we're going to get in some good stuff, good topics about what are the mindsets that you have to be successful, and why is that even relevant? Why is that important to what Seth said about the weather? Is there's always changing circumstances and factors going on around you, and you've got to figure out a way to bring your level of performance and make that unchanging regardless of what happens around you. And weather is one of those things that in a low-key way can kind of affect your performance, your sleep, getting up early, all that stuff, throws your discipline.
Discourage you from working out.
That's right.
I feel like that's always one that gets people and me.
It is. It really is. That kind of consistency.
We're not one of those swanky podcasts that are coming out of Hawaii or Florida.
No, sir.
You know,
we're those old school knuckle draggers up in Ohio just slogging along. So no shade today, though, towards our guest who's from Florida, Brian. Brian, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing very well, man. I'm sorry, not sorry. You get to choose where you want to live, man. You choose the colder climate up there. It's okay. I used to be a Midwest guy. I grew up in Chicago, but then chose to come down here to Tampa Bay for a litany of reasons. But yeah, beautiful, fun in the sun down here. Best beaches in the world. I'm not going to rub it in any more than that. I wouldn't do that.
That's good to put the accountability back on us, because you're right. And I could make all the excuses in the world, but at the end of the day, it's
I
my
choose
choice.
To live in a place where the wind hurts my face.
Yep.
You know what I mean? But although you look good, and so maybe I need to go to like Florida. You're 30, what'd you say, 39 years young.
Yep, 38, still already aging me. I got 1 month left before I get to 39, buddy. You're killing me, Smalls. Chuckle.
And you're a principal at Sunrise Capital Investors. Brian, I don't want to tell all your story, but you're into mobile home park acquisitions. Got a really cool story. We connected through Raise Masters, which is a capital raising coaching platform, really one of the top capital raising platforms, in my opinion, nationally in the private investment space. So give us a little bit of context. Who are you and what do you do today? And then we'll kind of back into how you got your start.
Yeah, so love that. Appreciate being on, man. Looking forward to adding value to everybody on the call today. But Brian Spear, principal co-founder over here at Sunrise Capital Investors. As you had outlined, right, we're a mobile home park fund that's basically been doing it now for over a decade, a little more than that. We also do parking, so parking lots and garages. We've been doing that for the last maybe 4 years or so. But how did we get involved in it? You know, what's the backstory? A little bit of color there. I didn't grow up in a really affluent environment, right? So now we've owned mobile home parks all over the country, own assets in 18 different states, hundreds of millions of dollars in mobile home parks, yada, yada. But my very first experience of mobile homes was when I lived in one when I was 10 years old. My parents got divorced. My dad moved to Gary, Indiana during the 1990s when it was known as the murder capital of the world, more murders per capita than any other city in the country.
Wow.
And my mom moved to a mobile home park on the south side of Chicago. And that was my experience, kind of my first foray in the mobile home park sector. And even though I was really young, 10 years old, I was like, look, I'm going to do whatever it takes to try to put my family in a position where I'll be in a more stable financial position when I'm having my family, et cetera, et cetera. So just, the question was, how do I get out of this situation? And I'm asking myself this literally at age 10. Well, I need to get money. How do you get money? I need a good job. How do I get a good job? I need a good, probably a degree. Well, how do I get a degree? I don't have any money. I better go find a way to get some scholarships to actually get that college paid for, right? So I worked really, really hard, both academically and athletically, to get college scholarship offers so that I could get college paid for. And fast forward through my adolescence, I wasn't tall enough to play basketball, wasn't strong enough to play football, but you could be pretty much any size and shape and play baseball. So I taught myself how to hit both right-handed and left-handed, because you get a lot of notoriety if you're an amateur baseball player, high school, right, and you're a switch hitter. Not a lot of guys do that. So I got a lot of offers all over and ended up landing at the University of Kentucky, where I played in the SEC, best baseball conference in the country. It was beautiful.
That's subjective, but yeah.
Run, man. Yeah. Yeah, so it was great. It was just, some of the glory days, as it were, right? So I ended up playing really well. I was one step beneath academic All-American when I was there. Was captain of the team, right? And we ended up having 6 different big leaguers on the team. So I wasn't the most
Wow.
talented guy, just worked super hard. And after that, I basically had the choice to either go play free agent ball in the minor leagues because I had a good career. I could either go play free agent ball with a couple of different teams, or because I was also a good student, had a few different job opportunities after school. It was either go sign for like $10,000 like free agent bonus and try your hand of trying to live the dream for a little bit, see if you can make it in the league. But you're literally making no money in the minor leagues. Or I could take basically a 6-figure job right out of the gate and kind of earn a living. So I chose that path. And ultimately kind of set me off on my professional career. So I'll push pause there, man. Happy to fill in some more gaps as needed.
So talk to me about this. You're captain of the baseball team, but obviously not the most talented guy. And you had 6 guys go on into the MLB and have some kind of a professional career. So them being more talented, but you being the team captain, I mean, what kind of level of respect did they give you more from, like, was it a work ethic perspective? Like, it wasn't based on talent that they gave you that respect in that position of authority. So, like, what even gave that as an opportunity?
Yeah, to me, I think it is lead by example, right? As a leader in an organization, whether you're on a team, a sports team, or you are running a business, you don't say, hey, go do this. You say, hey, follow me. You don't say, point over there, go do that stuff, guys. You say, hey, follow me and watch me go do this, and let's all roll together. And that's kind of how I have historically operated in my life, or have attempted to. So by way of example, when we were at Kentucky, right, over Christmas, the team gets together and they do what are those called, like elephant gifts or whatever, where everybody plucks out like one of those little paper things and there's a name that's written on it, and you've got to go get a gift for Bobby, right? And everybody gets a name, right? So, and we're all broke college kids, so the limit was like $10 or something. And my buddy Andrew Albers, who ended up pitching in the big leagues, ended up pulling my name, and he ended up giving me that Christmas. He basically took a piece of cardboard and cut it out and drew on it with a black Sharpie, and he cut it out in the shape of a key. And he was like, here's the key to the weight room. You basically live there already, so you might as well just get one for Christmas. So, like, I use that as an example because that's like the reputation that I'd had. The guy that just works really hard, always doing it, putting in the extra hours, going the extra mile. And that is the path that I have historically always chosen, to try to have people follow me along the way to improve the entirety of the organization, right? I would never ask somebody to do something that I wouldn't be willing to do myself. Now, again, hundreds of millions of dollars in mobile home parks all over the country. I've been a mobile home park manager. At one point, we had hired an on-site mobile home park manager in one of our communities, and they ghosted us. We're all operating remotely. And at the time, my business partner and I, he's 7 years my senior, wife, kids, married. At the time, I've got my beautiful girl at the time, but we weren't yet married, didn't have kids, etc. So it wasn't like locked down in that regard. And I had a little bit more flexibility. So we're closing the property the following day. And it's probably like 6 p.m. that evening. The mobile home park manager that we had hired is ghosting us. Kevin and I look at each other in the office. There's really no one else to solve this problem. I go, Kev, I was like, looks like I'm taking the red eye. Looks like I'm going to be the mobile home park manager tomorrow. So, I stayed on site for a couple of months while we got it up and running, et cetera, et cetera. You just have to be willing to do the things necessary to get the business off the ground or pull the team forward, et cetera, et cetera.
I don't want to make like too big of a jump here, and maybe I'll pass you the ball on this one. Observationally, would you say that in an organization, the most talented people are simultaneously the leaders?
I don't know if I agree with that one. I don't know. That's an interesting one. I don't think that it's an absolute necessity to have that respective trait be the source or the reason that people follow you. I don't believe that.
I don't think so either. I think it's an ownership perspective. I think that's one of the indicators. And Seth and I have talked about this, where as we've taken steps into business, you're going to find people that are better than you at something within your business, and hopefully you do find those people, because really the leader of an organization is the one that's like, I'm not going to be great at everything, but it shall be done, right? That's the mindset that comes from that. So I don't know if you'd seen that or experienced that, but you played that role of like, this is my baby. It's going to get done. If I've got to plug a hole, I'll do it. It's not going to be pretty, but it's going to get done.
Two things I want to say on this. Love it. Absolutely phenomenal stuff. One would be just to piggyback your last point regarding it's going to get done. You actually had mentioned at the very beginning of this podcast, said verbatim, you've got to figure it out. And those words ring so deeply to me because when I was at the University of Kentucky, again, first day on site, John Cohen is our head coach. He hands out to every one of the guys a little rubber band. Remember those ones that Lance Armstrong used to hand out that had those like little sayings on them?
Live
right?
strong.
Live strong or whatever. Yeah.
Live strong, exactly. So this one literally just said FIO. FIO, the acronym, and it stood for figure it out. And he basically, the message day one was, Dorothy, you're not in Kansas anymore. Okay, this is college. We're in the SEC. We're grown men. We're adults. I'm not your mommy. I'm not your daddy. I'm not going to help you with school. I'm not going to help you with these couple little things. You're a grown man and you need to figure it out. Okay. So he's putting the accountability on our plates when we show up there. And that is something that you obviously have to have as a business owner if you're going to be successful in whatever venture that is. And I'd say also as just a human being in life, right? You got to find ways to figure things out because life is tough, buddy. You're going to get hit, punched in the face over and over and over again. It's the old Winston Churchill quote, right? Success is basically the ability to move from failure to failure without any loss of enthusiasm along the way, right? So just keep it ripping, figure it out, and keep on rolling. So yeah, love that. Oh, and I was going to piggyback some other piece of it. Golly, I lost my train of thought, man. I had two things. I lost one.
It's okay. It might come to you. If you're listening to this episode and you haven't figured it out yet, this is lessons from a D-1 athlete about success in business. And I love talking with college athletes because there's so many lessons and principles that translate perfectly into the grit or the mindset or the skills that you need to be successful in business. And I would argue really in life. There's just so much overlap. One of the questions I have for you is effort enough?
Is effort enough? I would say that's not, it's not enough to just work hard. While I do love the quote, hard work pays off, because I do genuinely believe that. However, it's just not enough. There are additional variables that are necessary. If you're a guy, by way of example, that's playing D1 ball in college and you're playing baseball and you work hard, right? You do the reps. You go to practice, you do the reps, you're working hard while you're there. You go to the weight room, you lift hard while you're there. You're doing the thing, you're working hard along the way. I would pose that's still not enough. You have to find an edge and you have to be over prepared, in my humble opinion. One of the quotes that I'd heard growing up, and I can't remember where it came from, was that the difference between the good players and the great players is the mental game. And the difference between the great players and the very best players is still the mental game. Now, when you're a kid, you're an amateur, you can just practice, get a little bit better along the way. But once you're like playing high level D1 ball and then professional sports, it's basically a mental edge. And you gather that mental edge through not just hard work, but also exorbitant amounts of preparation. And it's why, Peyton Manning is one of the best all time, because he's literally the quarterback on the field, but he's also the offensive coordinator.
Yeah, right.
Because he's memorized every single player's background, skill set, everything about them along the way. And he's basically coaching everybody simultaneously while the game is going on, right? Same thing with Tom Brady. I can go on and on. Guys like that have a mental edge along the way, in my humble opinion, ultimately are the ones that are ultimately the most successful. So it can't just be hard work. It's got to be more than that. And another little phrase would be Ron Polk, preppertunity. So this is that edge that I'm talking about. It's not enough to just work hard and have that hard work. You've got to put in the extra effort. You got to do more. You got to be prepared mentally. And Ron Polk is a legendary Hall of Fame coach. He coached Mississippi State for decades and decades, and is now in the Hall of Fame, one of the best all time in the NCAA. And when I was getting recruited in high school, he was doing a speaking engagement in front of a bunch of high-level amateur high school kids. And it was the first time I ever heard the word preppertunity. Didn't know what it was. I was like, hey, actually, Ron, that's not a real word. And he went on to explain that, he's saying what you have to do is prepare in advance for your opportunity.
Yeah.
Because you never know when it's going to happen. And as the old, the great, wise American philosopher Eminem once said, you only get one shot. So you better not miss your chance to blow, right? So that's kind of the whole thing. You never know when it's going to happen. If you're a guy that's, second string, or you're riding the pine, and you mentally check out. If you worked hard all the way through practice, et cetera, but like you go out the night before, just because I'm not playing tomorrow, it's not that big of a deal. And the guy in front of you gets injured or falls, or you need to go pinch hit in the bottom of the ninth, 2 outs, bases loaded, and you're like not mentally prepared because you were hanging out the night before doing something else. You had your one opportunity there. Yeah. And you better take advantage of it in that moment. So because you never know if you're going to get that opportunity again.
So can we bring that down and let's translate that to like, how have you done that in your business? How have you, because obviously you guys have been doing it for a decade. You've had success. You've been able to build a large portfolio that you're holding and operating right now. How have you found your edge? Because you've obviously had the effort. If you were willing to live on your park and be a manager and have the effort for a couple months to like go and grit that out, because it's not like it's always glamorous living or it's a little bit easier if that was like in Hawaii or something. That would have been fun. That would have been like vacation. But so yeah, speak to that. How have you brought that principle down into your leadership style, your business?
Yeah. An example that I would say in real estate, practically for everybody doing this on the day-to-day, is the following. One of the main tenets of our investment philosophy is to buy deals with a margin of safety, protect the downside, right? The old Warren Buffett philosophy, rule number 1, don't lose money. Rule number 2, don't forget rule number 1. And you do that by having a philosophy of capital protection and buying deals with a margin of safety. Everybody knows you make money on the buy. Well, how the hell do you do that, right? That's the tough thing. Everybody knows the philosophy, but how do you actually do it? What we do is we do our best to try to find people that either need or want to sell. That's how we define a motivated seller. We find somebody who either needs or wants to sell. Well, somebody who needs to sell is somebody who's, dealing with a term debt expiration. They've got to wind down their fund in a predetermined period of time. They're forced to sell because the loan covenants, whatever the case may be, there's pressure applied to them for whatever reason they need to sell. Somebody who wants to sell is somebody who's just, the guy that's owned his property. You guys been in mobile home parks 30, 40 years. And he's just, he's at the end of his rope. He's just kind of tired of continually managing. He's a tired landlord, and he's just ready to hang it up and actually go right off into the sunset, right? He wants to sell. He made the decision. One day he just wakes up and made the decision. Well, our job is to be in front of that guy when he either needs or wants to sell. So how do you do that? You reach out to them over and over and over and over and over again. And the first time he says no, second time he says no, third time he says no, fourth time, 10th time he still says no. But eventually you try to catch him at the right time. The day after he just made the decision he's going to sell his park, and you want to be the first guy there to touch him the moment that he made that decision. And this is what I mean about that persistence over and over and over and preparing for that opportunity, because you never know when that guy's going to have a life event that materially changes his world where he wants to then ultimately sell that respective asset. So you prepare over and over and over again. You reach out over and over and over again for the one opportunity for him to sell that deal, because nothing's worse than having a guy that's on your list that you've been reaching out to for a few years, and then all of a sudden, boom, you call him up again. He goes, oh man, actually I just sold the deal to XYZ guy. And you're like, dude, we've been reaching out to you for 5 years. Can you just give me a ring?
Here's the irony of that. The irony is that the guy that he sold it to called him for the first time and just literally walked into a unicorn of a scenario. I have been on the receiving end of that phone call about 5 or 6 times, and those missed opportunities are incredibly painful, but they reinforce that like luck favors the prepared. And that level of persistence is literally, because here's the thing. People look at Brian like, wow, Brian, you guys are how are you getting all these deals? You guys must be at the right place at the right time. And they want to chalk it up to fortune, luck, whatever. And they're totally ignorant to the tenacity of your processes and commitment to find those deals.
You were at the right place at the wrong time 90% of the time, 95% of the time, and just waiting for it to hit. And it's so interesting. Because, for anybody listening, this is the story, even driving for dollars, single family houses. This is like in real estate investing 101. It's this principle of being persistent. Even when a seller tells you no, it's kind of a matter of time.
I agree. The longest relationship that we've held with a prospective seller in advance of us closing that deal is 7 years. So we reached out to somebody and we built a relationship with them over and over and over and over again for 7 years before we were able to buy that respective property. And
you guys are so lucky.
Yeah, exactly, right. And that's what people see, right? They see that it's like an iceberg, right? It's like this gigantic iceberg that's in the ocean, and all you see is the cool stuff at the top and how pretty it is, but you don't see that 90% of the mass is underneath, and it's the complete and total insanity and the amount of hard work and sleepless nights and ridiculousness and the extra effort that nobody ever sees, right? But they only see that refined peak at the pinnacle above the water, and that's okay. That's okay. But there's so much more to it if you really want to be successful.
So how do you sift out like that principle of the iceberg? You're new to business, you're new to real estate, you're trying to figure out what it takes, and you see the top of the iceberg. Mm-hmm. Some people will look at the top and then they realize, wow, there's a lot more under the surface, and be disinterested. And then some people will realize there's just ignorance that's keeping them from actually finding that success. How do you like vet or sift out the people that are just interested in the top of the iceberg and don't have any desire to put the effort in versus the people that are just ignorant and they need to be educated on like what it takes?
One of the things that I like to do when I'm bringing on teammates to our organization is ask a question, that's open-ended, and I want to learn more about what makes them tick. And it's one of those cheesy HR questions, right? You always get a bunch of them, some more practical about what they can actually do practically, historically, tactically, et cetera, and some versus, HR randomness. I like to ask if you won the lottery tomorrow, what'd you do with all the money, right? What would you do with all the money? And, you usually get a little bit of juice on, well, I'd go buy my mom a house and I go get a cool whip and a couple of cool toys and things of that nature. Nothing wrong with that. Okay. Nothing wrong with that. Everybody's going to go have a little bit of fun along the way. That's fine. But then what? You're still 28 years old, right? You're still 42 years old. You're still 26. You got decades to go. What are you going to do? Like, you've already done it. You got all the money in the world. Money's not a problem anymore. What are you going to do the next day? What are you going to wake up and do? And I want to hear from people that they would want to do something similar to that which they're doing or what they're applying for in our organization. Because life is too short to do something that you hate. If you're just doing a job for a paycheck, then you better find yourself a different job over time, because eventually you'll become a little bit more resentful. And Steve Jobs has a good little quote on this, and I'd seen him talking about this. And, being an entrepreneur is hard. It's not easy. It's very, very hard. It's very, very, very difficult. And most people quit because they're sane. Because you're going through failure and failure and failure. And it's like, why would you keep on doing this? This is crazy. It's just nuts. But if you really love it, then you'll be able to keep on doing it, right? So my background in this respective journey, growing up in a mobile home park, knowing what I know, the residents that we serve on the ground floor, that's my mom. She was a single mom, had just gotten divorced, 3 kids, trying to find the best affordable housing in the marketplace. After you've had some sort of level of success, you've got a certain level of income, you've got a certain net worth. Congratulations, you've become, quote, successful in the eyes of society. What helps you continue to tick as you progress? You better have something else that you're passionate about that actually makes you want to continue to get up in the morning and serve society and make a dent in the universe. And finding your passion, your purpose, what you really want to do, all those things can be cheesy HR things. But the truth is, I want to find people who really love what they're doing, because then they will be willing to endure all of the nonsense that's below the water that people don't typically see. You would not know in advance. Whenever you're going to any role, it's impossible to know, right? Just like you're down here in Florida, I'm driving up to Lima. I can't see over the horizon. I can't see every little step of the way. I put in the GPS. I'll find a way to eventually get there, but I don't know every step of the way. There's going to be turns and traps and roads closed and all the nonsense. But if you're willing to go through it and you've got the passion to ultimately make it happen, then eventually you'll get there. So anyway, I want to know what they really want to do and what their longer term goals are. That's I think very helpful.
That's good. Yeah. Because you remove all those limitations away of like the money. You've got the money. Now what? And it really drives to your why. If you can't answer that why, I think it's a yellow flag. Not that you're a bad person, but that you need to do some soul searching and clarify what that is for your life. And some of that comes incrementally. That's why you got to get reps in to figure out what you do and don't want to do. inaction is like the biggest poison, I think, to keep you from finding that why. Anything that you would maybe just fill out from your collegiate experience that has shaped you as a business entrepreneur today?
Oof. I would say maybe if any, adding on to the things that we've already talked about, I'd say maybe enjoy the ride. Enjoy the ride. As an entrepreneur, whew, like I said, it ain't easy, right? You go through ups and downs and ebbs and flows along the way, but golly, it's unbelievably rewarding. It's so much fun. Truly, if you enjoy what you're doing, you're serving society. It's a beautiful thing. But when I think about my historical athletic career, like I said, it's the glory days. But what do I miss the most about it? Do I miss the playing in front of the stadiums and the thousands of fans? I mean, I played at Ole Miss, and I had thousands of fans, thousands booing me on the road. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. My mom was listening on the radio. She calls me afterwards. She's like, "What did I do? I must have raised you wrong, son." And I was like, "No, it was a beautiful thing, Mom." So, like, is that the stuff that you miss? It's really not. What you miss is hanging out in the locker room with your buddies.
Yeah.
And the camaraderie and the bus rides and playing euchre and hanging out and doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the part that we all miss as entrepreneurs far too often, because you're buried down, head down, grinding away day after day after day. But the truth is, you got to enjoy the ride. You've got to try to make sure that you periodically will reflect. Because as an entrepreneur, right, I'm going to use the strategic coach, Dan Sullivan book title. It's so phenomenal that the idea of the gap in the game. As an entrepreneur, we're searching for the horizon. I am going to the horizon. There's always another mountain to climb, another goal. I'll get there. And then there's going to be another goal beyond that, another mountain to summit. There's always going to be another one. I'll never reach the horizon. And for that reason, man, you're always on the grind. But periodically, what you need to do is stop and reflect and look back and go, wow, we've come an exorbitant amount in such a reasonable period of time. Like, we've made such an impact. We're doing so unbelievably well, because then it helps you appreciate all the things you're doing and enjoy it so much more, as opposed to just being solely focused on the horizon, because that leads to burnout and discontentment and so much more. So I think that piece of it, right? It's just trying to ensure that you're actually having fun along the way, man. That's a huge piece. That's a huge piece.
Before we go into our smaller pocket segment, if you're listening to this, man, these are like tried and true principles. And it's taken me time to realize this. When you're listening to a podcast, you're just consuming information, and you're just always inundated with audiobooks, podcasts, YouTube videos, how-tos. There's just constant information. But really stop and listen, because when someone gives you a principle that is so fundamental, it's hard to overestimate how big of a deal that is. And so maybe you're listening to this and you're going to tuck it in your back pocket for a future date, and that's fine. But man, Brian, what you're saying is massively true, because it is easy to miss the journey. And ironically enough, as an entrepreneur, we don't want to get to the end result and the destination, because that's a part of the game. That's the fun of it. That's the enjoyment. So what are we really in love with? It's the journey itself. And so if you totally miss that, you're missing out on one of the biggest values, I think, of being in business. But anyway, cool. Thanks for sharing that.
All right, we're going to jump into our smaller pocket segment. So Brian, go ahead and tell us about your worst deal. What went wrong? What happened? And most importantly, what did you learn from it?
Let me count the ways.
1, 2, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess if I'm going to point out maybe one deal that it didn't go the way that we had originally anticipated, we bought a deal in Oklahoma that we liked. We were excited about, as we're excited about every deal, or else you wouldn't purchase it, right? I bought it for right at $3.3 million. A mobile home park. Can't remember. It was about 100 spaces, probably 2018, something like that. And good deal, light value add project. They had just brought city water, city sewer to that respective property. So now we got municipal utilities, feel good about that. It came off of a lagoon, which is a private system, which was not something that was appealing, but ultimately now that it was more stable in terms of the infrastructure, we felt good about taking that down, long-term hold, and had value add in that we were below market rents, and there was an infill opportunity on some of the vacant lots, right? So I won't go through the nuance of mobile home parks. You guys have likely covered it historically. And so just a normal deal down the fairway, kind of the same bread and butter deals that we've done ad nauseum for the last decade. And when we got into it, we start rolling. We had a very unique circumstance occur, which ended up being uh, where we felt like a hamster on a wheel, where we couldn't get any traction. Typically, when we do the value add plan, our NOIs are increasing and we're actually making progress. The value of the property is increasing along the way. And we're implementing that business model along the way, doing all those various things. But the reason that we were a hamster on a wheel is because while we're getting more revenue into the top of the funnel, right? If I'm thinking about a faucet, we're getting more revenue into the top of the faucet. Our expense side, we've got with the drain, we forgot to plug the drain and it was coming out of the bottom. And the reason was because of a very unique situation in the mobile home park sector. You guys have likely covered this, but mobile homes are um, uh, it's not really aptly named due to the fact that mobile homes they're really not terribly mobile. Typically, mobile homes only move twice. They move from the manufacturer to the mobile home park, and then they move from the mobile home park to the dump after the end of its useful life expectancy, which is typically like decades and decades down the road. They usually don't move, right? Mobile homes really aren't that mobile because they cost thousands of dollars to move those individual homes. So for that reason, the break-even cost of moving those just not really doesn't pencil from the resident's perspective. Let's say that we're in a mobile home park and our lot rent's $350, and uh, we increased it from 300 to 350 or whatever. I'm gonna try to use easy rough math. And maybe one of our competitors is at 340 and now we're at 350. So we're $10 higher than the guy down the street. Well, if he's going to move his mobile home over to the competitor, he's going to save $10 per month. Well, the break even on that is an extremely long period of time due to the fact that it costs about $6,000 to move a single wide, $10,000 to move a double wide. The ability to get $10 a month, and there's no guarantee that the guy next door is not going to raise his rents in 6 months or 8 months. So these homes, they very, very rarely move. But in this scenario, it was very, very odd because there was a mobile home park where the owner I talked about, right, either needs or wants to sell. He got into the end of his life and he was like, you know what? He's a developer that had owned the asset for decades and decades, and he was ready to ride off into the sunset. But as opposed to doing what most normal folks do, where they ultimately put it up for sale with a commercial real estate broker or ultimately sell it to somebody else, an operator like us, you, whatever, he ended up selling the individual mobile home lots to the residents that are on the ground floor.
Weird.
And it was very, very, very weird. So he sold them individually to all the residents, and he had several different vacant lots. Well, he's selling them for just a few $1,000s. And all of a sudden, when you can start to see where the break even becomes pretty reasonable if instead of saving maybe $10, they have a downstroke of just a few $1,000s out of pocket. They find a way to scrabble together a few $1,000. And they're saving now not just $10 a month, but several hundred, the entirety of the lot rent. Then the break even becomes a little bit more palatable and a little bit more reasonable. So we had several homes actually move out of that respective community until such time as those respective lots were basically full, and then no more homes were going to get put in there. And so we had some homes cycling out. We're bringing in new homes, but golly, it was just you felt like a hamster on a wheel throughout this entirety of the process. And ultimately, at the end of the rainbow, we ended up doing okay on the deal. We ended up selling it for like 3.5, 3.6 million. So better than the sharp stick in the eye, but didn't do near as well as what we had originally anticipated along the way. Cash flow was basically de minimis in the interim period compared to what we had originally anticipated. And it was just one of those very weird, random things where, life happens, right?
You can't plan for that.
And that was a weird one. Yeah, it was a weird one. It was a weird one.
So the takeaways for that, like, was it we won't buy deals that are not traditional, because that's a non-traditional scenario, or what did you guys say this was our lesson?
Well, I would give a couple things here. I think that's why we have the philosophy that we have that's just been honed over time, which has numerous different tenets. I've mentioned one of them already, right? Buying deals with the margin of safety, but those tenets are largely focus on buying deals that have cash flow day one that are going to help you ride out the next inevitable recession. You never know when it's going to happen, but you can rest assured the next black swan event is going to occur. You don't know when. My crystal ball is broken, so is yours. But you got to have enough cash flow to ride out the recession. You got to have ability to add value in that respective property, the ability to increase the NOI. You personally can do something to increase the NOI and not just let Mr. Market kind of determine whether or not this is a good investment. You've got to find a way to protect the downside, buy with a margin of safety, right? If you've got enough margin of safety, even if things go wrong, right? You've got enough margin of safety there where you're okay. We bought that deal at a discount. I can't imagine if we would have overpaid or paid market or overpaid.
Yeah, right.
You know, we would have been in a precarious situation. And then beyond that, just being really, really tax efficient along the way, et cetera. But I think it just goes back to those fundamental pieces that you're referencing, right? If you do those fundamental pieces, then you can take maybe a bad deal and turn it into an okay deal along the way, right? The difference between a good operator and a bad operator. A good operator can take a bad deal and make it turn out just okay. And a bad operator can take an absolutely pristine, phenomenal, cherry, amazing asset and literally run it right into the ground and bankrupt the deal. If they put too much debt on the property, it gets foreclosed and all these various things. Right. So it goes back to those fundamental pieces along the way. And it's why guys, you know, that get involved in investing in these from a limited partners perspective, they always say, you know, you bet on the jockey, not the horse. You bet on the sponsor. You don't bet on the deal itself, but rather the sponsor's intuition and decades of experience, et cetera, et cetera.
I think when you look at a lot of these guys that have been, whether it's the Warren Buffetts, the Charlie Mungers, right? These guys who have been investing for decades and decades and decades, they have rules. There are these objective things that they follow because they know that their emotions will skew their judgment, and they need something staring at them to say, these are my self-imposed rules that I adhere to so that I don't mess up and, you know, absolutely jeopardize things. And those tenets for your company, their rules for someone else in the marketplace, you have to have that objectivity because everybody has that ability to kind of fall in love with it, get a little too close to it, you know, get your emotions wrapped up in the upside and the potential and miss something. So I don't know, that would be maybe my kind of spin on that as well, is to have those things identified. If you don't have those, you don't really have a system. You're just shooting from the hip. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that then you might get individual deals, right? I think the difference would be you might find a good investment, but you really don't have a business, right? There's a difference between finding an individual deal, an individual investment, and actually having a business, a simple, repeatable business that you can get to scale over time, right?
That's great. All right, man, we're going to go into what we call our little nugget. So, Brian, this is part of our show where you give us a practical takeaway or a piece of advice for our listeners that they can implement to their business, their personal growth. It's open-ended. Lead us.
You know, I would say so many good things, and golly, this has been so much fun along the way. But I think that I would say, you know, you already dropped Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, some of my guys, man, just absolute phenomenal mentors, et cetera. Just, you know, not mentors personally, but mentors via reading, audiobooks, podcast, all that good stuff, right? I love their philosophy. We try to implement as much as we possibly can that they've learned over time, right? If we've taken a guy that from $0, Warren Buffett took a business from $0 to $1 trillion in one generation. He's obviously thought well, and
he's lucky.
Has a pretty sound investment. He's very lucky. He's a sound investment strategy along the way, right? In any event, what I would say is think in decades. Think in decades. For so many reasons. But I'd point out the following, right? One of the things that we try to talk about it. Charlie Munger likes to think from an inverse perspective, like what are the absolute worst case scenarios, as opposed to when you're doing the underwriting, the upside, et cetera. He's thinking about all the worst case possible scenarios along the way. And so when you think in decades, you could try to think through what is the worst possible thing that could happen. Well, if I'm doing a value add plan and I got to buy, fix, and sell in the next 3 years, and the black swan event occurs, i.e. COVID occurs or whatever, right at the term debt expiration when I've got to sell this asset, clearly this is a massive problem. So in my humble opinion, I like the idea and the concept of thinking in decades. Real estate, this type of business, real estate, it is not a get-rich-quick style of business over a short period of time with a low probability of success. Real estate is a build massive amounts of wealth, generational wealth, over a very long period of time with a very high probability of success. So long as you think in decades, you protect the downside, you implement those tenets that I had outlined a little earlier. And because time heals a lot of wounds in real estate, right? Peter Linneman talks about 10-year cycles, where over the course of that 10-year horizon, you probably have 6 years that are run of the mill, 6 years that are like average normal. Then you got 2 years that are really, really, negative downside, 2 years that are unbelievably profound on the upside. Well, if you got to like sell immediately in this 2 years, well, you're going to be in a precarious situation. But if you got a long enough horizon, those rates of return are going to end up ironing out, and you're going to revert back to the mean. You're going to ride it out and do pretty well at that time. But in my opinion, you want to structure your business, you want to structure all your investments and your business such that you think in decades and can ride out any of those inevitable downturns, because they're coming. It's definitely going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's think in decades. I would just point to that.
That's good. That's good. I got nothing to add. That's good advice. What's been one of the best resources for your business development? I mentioned Dan Sullivan earlier, so I'll give him a shout out. Don't get anything for this, but Dan Sullivan's the man. He's absolutely phenomenal. I mentioned the book, The Gap and the Gain. For those that have not read Who Not How, go check that out. Absolutely phenomenal stuff. And he runs a company called Strategic Coach. We've been a member of that for some time. And a lot of guys have heard of EOS and the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and they run their businesses on EOS. But what they may not know is the founder of that business, Gino Wickman, has been a member of Strategic Coach for like 30 years. And he's basically, if EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, is the operating system for the business, then Strategic Coach is kind of like the operating system for the entrepreneur. It's how to think appropriately. And it's more for maybe more modest-sized solopreneurs, more modest-sized businesses. And then EOS is more like, hey, once you get up and running a little bit, you got a couple $1 million of revenue and you got 10 to 50 employees. But Strategic Coach is such a foundational piece, I think, that would help out a lot of people, because many of the guys that have because EOS and Gino did a great job of marketing and getting their word out there. But I feel like the foundational building block is the strategic coach that get overlooked. Yeah, that's good. That's a good distinction. Awesome. Man, this has been awesome. I love you've got all these things in your tool belt. You just are like a one-liner machine, just pumping stuff out. I love it.
I'm a dork, man. That's why. Just a dork.
Well, our listeners are going to benefit from your dorkish nature here. So thank you for doing that. What does it look like for people to follow your success, connect with Sunrise Capital Investors?
Yeah. We're pretty easy to find. We got, we started the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast over a decade ago, been downloaded millions of times all over the place. Feel free to go check it out. My business partner runs that, Kevin Bupp. And if you want to learn more, you can go to investwithsunrise.com. We try to keep it simple, stupid. Investwithsunrise.com. It'll take you to where you need to go.
Awesome, man. Well, dude, thank you again for today and just imparting this stuff to our listeners.
Yeah, awesome stuff, man. My pleasure.
As always, excited that you joined us for another episode of the Reinvest Podcast. If you want to learn how you can use your hard-earned capital to diversify into real estate, go to our website, reinvestcapital.us, and shoot us a message. Move farther, reach higher, and grow deeper.